All right. Hey, everyone. I think it's enough to get going. Welcome, everyone, to the Puppeteer AI webinar on longevity and AI. I'm Federico. I'm the CEO of Puppeteer, and I'll be hosting this conversation today. Yeah, really glad everybody's here. So I'll keep this intro very short, just so we can jump straight into the conversation. Today, we are talking about a tension that sits right in the middle of longevity and mainstream healthcare. On the one hand, the longevity field promises deeply personalized care that's based on your biology, on your genes, your data, your goals. And on the other side, mainstream regular healthcare systems that people have access to, they scale by running on standardized protocols and repeatable workflows. So we're going to start by talking a little bit about what happens when these two worlds collide and where AI can actually help bridge this gap between these two very different ways of working. We'll talk as well about what it would take for this hyper-personalized approach to medicine to move from premium boutique sort of clinics into mainstream healthcare. And we'll do it in three topics, which we will cover one by one, and we'll have a Q&A at the end as well. If at any point something comes up into your mind as we speak, please drop it in the chat, and we'll cover it over the Q&A section. I'd like to, before we get going, introduce our panel. First of all, I want to introduce Pia Mancini. Pia is the founder and CEO of GiveZero. GiveZero is a mobile platform aimed at women navigating perimenopause and menopause. In the platform, they can track symptoms, connect their wearables, add lab results, and the platform helps them spot patterns and turn that into more personalized guidance. It also includes Nova, which is their AI assistant that you can talk to about your symptoms, and it can guide you through your journey. Secondly, I'd like to introduce Jesse Levey. Jesse is the founder and CEO of Longevity Health. He built the company after trying to put together a structured, science-based longevity plan for himself and finding it to be a difficult and interesting challenge. Longevity Health runs a doctor-led longevity program that's built around your biomarkers. So they do diagnostic testing and then build a personalized plan across things like exercise, nutrition, sleep, and ongoing monitoring with a care team available that you can message as you go. And third, I'd also love to introduce Carolina Zimet. She's a managing partner at Panmabí Ventures. Panmabí is an early-stage VC in Latin America, investing in companies focused on mental health, longevity, and overall well-being. Carolina is an economist and a financial analyst and has spent years backing and building companies across the region. Thanks everyone for being here. And yeah, let's start. So our first topic is at the center of the tension in this whole space. It's about how to scale personalization. So as I mentioned, longevity medicine promises care that's built around the patient, but healthcare at scale runs on standardization. So Jesse, let me start with you. From your experience running Longevity Health, how hyper-personalized is the care that you provide? And what role could AI play in that personalization?
Yeah, I mean, at Longevity Health, first, thanks for having me. Thank you all for being here today. At Longevity Health, everything we do is personal. So, I like to say in the longevity space, there are no universal things other than, everybody needs to sleep, everybody needs to eat, people should exercise. But the specifics of what you should do, Federico, and what I should do are different based on our biology and our goals and our lifestyle and our biomarkers and all of this. And so in order to get the most out of what we're trying to achieve, we need a custom plan. And by the way, this generic plan is not working when it comes to longevity. It may work some for disease management. I think that's debatable, but I kind of leave that to others. but our lifespan is not expanding. Our health span is certainly not expanding. We know the things that people need to do. We keep telling them this generic advice, you know, eat a well-balanced diet. We change the food pyramid from one way to the other way. You know, we tell people to exercise 150 minutes a day. You know, people don't do it. So we know what people should do in a generic sense, but that actually has not achieved good outcomes. And so the customized personal approach really is required. And the impediment to that is clinician time. You know, I think that most people would welcome a more custom personalized approach. But the challenge is that, you know, our healthcare system, at least in the US, is not set up in a way that can actually offer that amount of time that's required. So we do it in our clinic, but we don't get reimbursement from insurance. People have to pay out of pocket for it. But actually, AI can do that incredibly efficiently at a very low cost. And so I think that is sort of the cornerstone of the solution to this exact challenge, which is how do we bring hyper-personalized medicine to the masses, and AI is really the best way to do that.
That makes a lot of sense, Jesse. Maybe as a quick follow-up to you, what do you see as the biggest challenge in actually scaling these personalized longevity protocols without compromising the quality of care?
Well, the biggest challenge is a regulatory one. You know, in both in the US and in other countries, the ability for AI to actually execute on things is limited. And so I think that will change over time. But today, an AI can't prescribe medication, can't order lab work, can't make medical diagnoses, can't do referrals. And all those things are required in order to really do this effectively. And so, you know, I think that over time that will have to change. And that's what will ultimately allow us to get to the next step.
That makes sense. Pia, I'd love to bring you in. You know, when people interact with AI around something like their health, there's generally a lot of hesitation. Pia, what makes patients comfortable interacting with AI in this sort of longevity context? And more specifically, what are things that you just cannot get wrong in the user experience?
So I think that in the specific niche that Give Zero operates in, which is like women post 35, specifically perimenopause and menopause, in general, we've been so dismissed by the healthcare system in general and the medical community in general that I think the barriers to adopt AI and to feel comfortable with that for us are very low because we haven't really found answers anywhere else, right? And so I think that the possibility or the opportunity of someone helping you connect the dots about what's going on in your body, instead of hearing you're too young, your labs are fine, you know, it must be stress, you're getting old, it happens to everyone, you know, which is like the normal answers that we get. So the delta between like the care that we need and the care that we have access to is like so big that AI just fills up that space very naturally. And it's a very natural kind of space for women to turn into. I think that said, because of that, companies like Give Zero and others that are operating in this space, like really carry the burden of like making sure that we are providing or we are like using AI in the most responsible possible way, right? Because we're talking about normally users that do not get answers anywhere else, right? So if they come to us for answers, we just like need to be very particularly careful about what we provide. And we don't diagnose, as Jesse was saying, like, especially not in perimenopause, like there is no diagnosis for perimenopause, it doesn't exist. It's like symptoms and it's very symptom. There's not a lab test that tells you, yes, you're in perimenopause or not. And so we stayed very, very, very away from diagnosing. We've created our own frameworks for analyzing different phenotypes, so different stages in the transition, that will help women understand where they are in the transition and what's going on with their bodies. I think that things that we can't get wrong have to do with, I think at the very basic level, the tone is super important for us. because if you talk to any chatbot out there, like the way they sound, the tone that they use is not great. It doesn't feel like cared. It doesn't feel like someone who's taking care of you, or who's like, it still feels like very dismissive, or it feels fake, right? So I think that tone for us is very, very important. We try to make sure that we are sounding empathetic, and we're sounding like someone who's communicating with them, not from a place of like, a pedestal, but from a place of understanding and supporting and helping. But at the same time, we also need to stay away from the wishy-washy wellness, you know, style that is out there. So it's challenging like that at the very basic level. That is challenging. And of course, then it's like what sources you're using, right? That is like the second kind of level of, you can't get wrong. You can't have an AI that answers based on what it read in Reddit. You have to very carefully limit. The guardrails have to be very, very protected.
We've definitely, seen a lot of examples now in the media of AI chatbots sort of going rogue and going way beyond guardrails. So yeah, that's a very salient point, especially when it's talking to patients. Moving on to Carolina, to sort of get the investor side of this as well. As an investor, when you're evaluating longevity companies, what signals tell you that their approach can actually scale? What are you looking at that is like, okay, this longevity company, what they're doing, this could actually scale, and it's not going to just stay as this boutique concierge sort of endeavor?
Hi, everybody. Thank you for inviting me here. I think it's very important when you are speaking about scale these companies, because there are maybe many great companies, boutique companies, but these are not companies which we are investing. We have to separate about marketing of personalization about as the capability of really personalization. Many companies claim that they can do personalization, but they have a lot of data, but they cannot operationalize it. So how we see it is they have to be protocol, they have to be repeatable. It cannot depend on a brilliant practitioner, but in a system with structured data layers, with risk stratification, and it has not to be static. It has to have adaptive logarithms. So that's something we really watch when we are analyzing different companies. We also need to have consistency. It cannot be like one special case. We all love what Brian Johnson does, but that's not something that can be repeated to everybody. So it has to be measurable, and we can have to see that the biomarkers really change with that. And also, it's crucial for us that they can be integrated to the payable systems, because to be massive, they have to be integrated to them.
Yeah, that last point is a perfect segue as well to our next topic. So that's definitely sort of where I'd like to move the conversation now to. Our second topic is all about that, about how to take longevity from something that's, a boutique field to something that can really scale and live in, alongside the rest of the healthcare system. Right now, most longevity medicine lives in premium clinics, usually where customers self-pay. So it's still somewhat of a niche. And if it is going to matter in the long term, it has to plug into the existing healthcare system, whether that's alongside primary care, through health plans, through employers, and so on. So again, starting with Jesse here. Jesse, what would it take, from your perspective, to take these longevity tools and to actually have them be plugged into the existing healthcare system instead of sitting outside of it? What would have to change for that to happen?
Well, I think the way we've approached it is really it's about driving down the cost. And so, historically, some of these like top tier high end longevity programs have been as much as $100,000 US per year. And we dropped that down to $10,000, which is still inaccessible to most people at that price point. You can't really use insurance because it's not going to, we're not going to reimburse enough that will recoup that cost. The next phase of our business brings it down to $1,000 a year. And we believe that we can get it down to $100 a year. And so if you take, a longevity model that's driving, and by the way you drive down that cost is through AI, because again, the biggest barrier to longevity, it's not, what got me so excited about longevity is as I started digging deep into it, it's not like the really expensive things like stem cell therapy and gene editing and all that. That may come, but today, the things that we know work, the things that will extend the lifespan and health span of 8 billion people are mostly lifestyle, maybe slightly more aggressive screening than some of the standard of care, maybe some low-cost medications. I mean, GLP-1s are probably a little higher cost, but even that is not tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. And so what the barrier is around the clinician's time. That's the reason why these things cost so much money. And you can scale that with AI to drive down the cost. You drive down the cost and you change the regulatory so that actually you can get reimbursed, even if it's like $20 for a chat with an AI versus, $500 for the chat with the doctor. You're going to see, payers are going to be happy to do that, especially as we can show outcomes. And so to me, it's about cost and regulatory. And if we can do those two things, we can, take this more mainstream. Most people I know want to live healthier, don't want to get a chronic disease, don't, want to maintain their cognitive abilities as they age, their physical abilities as they age. A lot of people will say, I don't want to live longer. And that's because of their mindset around what it means to live longer. But if we can lower the cost and change the regulatory, I think we'll have a huge impact.
That makes a lot of sense. I have some similar questions for each of you guys. So maybe from Pia's perspective, just going to you, Pia. Similarly, what barriers do you think could slow down the adoption of longevity projects such as Give Zero at scale? And maybe a little bit more practically, what are you at your company doing to remove some of those barriers?
I think I agree with Jesse. I think like we all we are on the same page. I think most of us working in this space, like the regulatory, we operate in Europe, for example, which is like even more difficult. That I always say that it's like Europe is like the California of the US, it's like if you operate in California, you're more or less okay in the rest of the states. In Europe, if you operate in Europe, you're more or less okay in the rest of the world. The barrier is very high. And so I think the regulatory landscape is obviously like the biggest hurdle. I don't see how that is gonna kind of change very quickly unless we start kind of having some serious clinical data. And so I think that we need to do more, and that's something that we want to do. It's more clinical studies to see, what the changes have been, to measure kind of changes in after using the application. There's a hospital in Barcelona that operates really well with digital platforms and digital health, and they do a lot of these studies. So I think that most of us working in this space should start kind of gathering the data to support like the argument for regulatory change. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. Regulators are not going to. They're very scared of AI in Europe. They've even moved like AI companies to like stage 2, that certifications, and so it's quite complex. So for us, we need to stay away from diagnosing. It's the only path forward until you test your product enough and you're robust enough that you say like, okay, we're gonna make these kind of clinical studies and we're gonna invest like, a chunk of money in getting like to stage 1 and 2 approved. But the barrier is very, very high. So most of us are staying like below that threshold by navigating this like ridiculous line between like sounding generic but really trying to be personalized, and doing personalized advice without it sounding like advice, because it's all about that, right? It's all about like how do you stay within thresholds in order to be able to test your product and get enough traction to see what your the impact that you're having and get your users. So I think that is obviously the biggest hurdle, and that's what we are kind of navigating at the moment. Yeah.
That makes sense. Maybe as a quick follow-up, Pia,
Mm.
have you seen any positive progress since you've been on this field in Europe in terms of, has there been changes to regulation already, or has it been pretty much in
Not
stasis?
really, no, it's stayed. I mean, there is some on the GDPR side, which doesn't really impact us, but impacts everyone. But it's also like, thank you. There is some progress there in like turning down the dial of the cookies and all the madness of the regulation around that. But that's all there is. I think that when it comes to women longevity, one of the another, I think, I don't know if it's a hurdle, but it's something that we need to tackle and work on, has to do with what I call gender-specific AI. So right now, all AIs are trained on existing data, most of which has male bias, right? Because until 1993, you didn't have to have women in clinical trials. Most of the medicine had been tested mostly in males. All like mice for clinical trials are male, or the monkeys are male, right? Everything that is not like bikini medicine, so boobs and tubes, is done in males, and so that produced like a whole set of skewed medical data on which these AIs have been trained. It's not because they're evil; it's just the data that it's available, right? So I think that specifically for women and women longevity, I think that trying to move the needle towards like more gender-specific AI and training models on data that actually includes women in all the studies, right? Not just in things that are exclusively women, because like, hormonal changes affect everything. We absorb drugs in a different way. There's a whole like slew of changes that they have to do with the women's body holistically, not just like boobs and tubes. So I think that is something that we need to start making some progress as a society, and as longevity as an industry. We cannot keep talking about like longevity without an AI without tackling this hurdle.
Yeah, no, that's I think you bring up a very, very important and like often ignored point there. Thanks, Pia. Carolina, from your perspective now, again, just thinking about at the moment of evaluating whether a company is worth investing on, or a solution is worth investing on, what are the green flags that you look for at Panmabí that suggest that a specific company has real staying power? It can sort of endure and be successful.
Okay. First of all, I want to say something about Latin America for the previous question. And I believe that here in Latin America, it's very important the alignment between the government and what is longevity. Like talking that longevity, it's not about a premium concierge where you are going to do like red light and something like that, but it's something that it has an economic burden for the government and for society. If women do not work after 45 or 50 as they should, if we want to get longer the years we work because we have a problem of how long we are living, but we are not living in a good way, it's really very costly for governments. So first of all, I believe like here in Latin America, this will gradually change because reality is not the same as it was in the last years. We are now living much more years, and women are much more part of the workforce. So this is something that I believe it has to change to longevity, change from this premium space to everyone's space, because to be integrated to the medical system. And after said that, to be integrated in the medical system, I think that all longevity companies have to work in the real world with not clean data, because it's not like everything you plan, you have your biomarkers and your exams plans and exams and everything. You will not put it in the way that you want it, and it has to be okay with dirty data. And also, and more important, with the imperfect adherence, because I think we are speaking about longevity, about everything we want, about people, about what they should do. But if they take supplements, they won't take it every day. They won't take it at the hour we would like them to take it. They won't do the gym or sleep whatever we want them to sleep. So I think that the longevity solution has to work in that world where adherence is not okay and data is not okay. And another thing I believe is that the solutions shouldn't be only in the long term, because if not, the payers or the providers will not support it at last, so it won't scale. You have to see some midterm or short-term different solutions, because if not, it's very difficult from a behavioral point of view that you will acquire this in a mass space.
The barrier to lifestyle change is not just on the patient. It's on our healthcare system and providers to develop a custom plan that people actually will implement. You know, like there's nobody I know who's like, oh, I would, you know, I'm not interested in being healthier in general. There are some things people, you know, everybody has their own lifestyle things they're willing to do. So like I had a friend of mine who was interested in longevity. He's like, you know, I really would like to be into your program, but, you know, I have a problem. My wife loves to cook. I love to eat. It brings us closer together. And so I can't be into longevity because my diet isn't, you know, crazy Brian Johnson's, right? And that then becomes a barrier, but that's workable, right? I mean, you know, he's not going to have a perfect diet. I'm the CEO of Longevity Health. I don't have a perfect diet. He could probably improve it, but also there's other things he can do. And so finding a path that's going to work for an individual is something that takes time and effort. AI can do that. A highly skilled clinician can do that. But most people can't do it on my own. And I started my own company because I found so much challenge doing it on my own. And I'm really deep into this. And so, you know, to me, there is a path for everyone. And not everybody, almost nobody's going to be perfect. Based on what we know today, I don't believe anybody is going to live forever. You know, if there's new things that come down the pipe that, you know, change that will be, you know, that could extend maximum human lifespan, great. But we can all maximize our own lifespan based on what we're willing to do and what we're not willing to do. But we need time, and it takes time and effort to actually figure out that plan.
Yes, I believe that AI can make it with less time and less effort. And I'm thinking especially in Latin America, where people cannot make ends meet, most of the people. So when they get after 12 or 14 hours of working in a health system, for example, a nursery, they do not have time to cook themselves, or they do not have time to think how they sleep or whatever. So I believe that the behavioral change is something very important, and that AI can help in that, and especially for people who do not have time or do not have extra energy for effort, because they have to do is work to eat, to have something to eat, to give a place to sleep for their children. So I'm thinking of those massive populations from Latin America, which are I think the most here. And I believe that that's why that's so important about behavior.
And this is where the customization comes into play, because, you know, exactly what you said is that, you know, people may not know that. They're like, oh, well, I don't have time to cook my own meals, so I can't be healthy. But there are options, and helping people figure out what is the right option that's going to work for you and your lifestyle. You mentioned sleep. Like, one of the big things that we focus on is, like, before we try to get you to sleep more hours, We want to just optimize the time you're already spending in bed. Make sure that you're going to get the highest quality of sleep, whether it's 5 hours or 6 hours or 8 hours, right? And so that becomes really important. But it takes time, and one size fits all is not.
I think that's
Which,
sorry, Caro. I was just saying to your point, Caro, about adherence. I think that's where AI can really help with adherence, because it can sort of on the fly adapt to whatever are the realities of a person's life at a particular time. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, Caro.
sorry, I didn't understand the question.
When it comes to adherence, I think AI can, there's a way in which AI can really help with that, because it can adapt the protocols to the specific circumstances that are going on the person's life at any given time, right? So it can be more thorough and strict in terms of the protocols at a certain point, and it can be more lax at some others. I'll just throw that your way, but feel free to comment on that or anything.
Yes, I believe that's one of the greatest changes that AI can make in longevity, because we always speak about what Brian Johnson and the niche clinics, but for example, solutions like PIAs for women in the perimenopause, and I think little change in what you eat, how you sleep, and different things, and also giving education to the people, because the normal people, they don't read all these books, which are really famous about longevity. They do not have the money and will never have it for do all those 300 markers that you need to be done, and then interpret them and then change it every time. So I think here is some of the greatest power of AI, and we don't need the government, we don't need a different drug. Here, I think it's like in the short term, the most powerful about longevity we can replicate all over the world.
Definitely. And maybe for Pia, who spoke about the regulatory slowness in Europe, I think your point a little while ago, Pia, was that the biggest driver to push this forward is actual clinical outcomes. But I was wondering what you think the role of advocacy for longevity in general is, whether it does sort of it makes things faster, if it's counterproductive. They mentioned Brian Johnson a couple of times. There's been a lot of very public figures that have been working in this space. So yeah, what do you think about them and the role?
I think with all the love in the world, I think longevity has a bit of a Silicon Valley bro kind of veneer to it that we need to remove, right? We need to kind of push through that. I think that when it comes, the way I understand longevity for women, like longevity for women in my mind starts with managing like menopause symptoms, right? The things that make us age most rapidly are kind of the changes that we undergo at this particular period. So I think that I think there is a huge role of advocacy into kind of changing a little bit the narrative that longevity is not like, I don't know, Andrew Huberman optimizing, like supplements, but which I love Andrew, like he's a great like advocate for all of that. And but I think that in order to kind of get massive, we need to do that work. And then we need to kind of also, I think, there's a lot of awareness that we need to do, at least for women for sure, that like the things that happen when you're 70 don't start at 70, start like at your early 40s, late 30s, right? We don't get osteoporosis at 75. We get it because our bone density starts declining now. We don't get Alzheimer's. Now we actually know that we don't get Alzheimer's. It's not a disease of the old age, it just manifests, when we're old, but it actually starts a lot earlier, right? So I think that there is this role that we can take in kind of bringing longevity to the present, right? Like longevity to today, longevity to everyone who's like 30, 40, and what does that mean, right? And I think that can help move the needle a little bit in in the regulatory space. That said, I think it's hard to move regulation. Like it's very, very difficult. And I think it's okay that it's hard, right? Because regulations are there in place to make sure that some things are like hard to do, right? Some changes are hard to make, that we need to, we need to pass a certain bar in order to go there. So I think it's a bit extreme in Europe for sure. Latin America and US is a lot less. Like the FDA, for example, has like expedited processes for digital applications that doesn't exist in the EU, for example. So minor changes, for example, an app like mine, if we would want to do something like more diagnostic, we would have to compete with like a device that you put in your body. Like we would have to go through the same process as something that you put in your body, right? And that's mental. That doesn't make any sense, right? So that has to change. In the US, that is different, and definitely in Latin America, that is different. So it also, I think, I think changes need. I think regulatory hurdles and regulatory changes in Europe, like should happen. I'm not a super optimist about the pace of that change, to be honest, but I do think that awareness, mass adoption of these tools, and advocacy can help. But we need to prove that this is for everyone. It's like what Caro was saying. Like there is like no argument to be made if longevity is perceived as something niche coming, from for high net worth individuals. Like that's not going to change anything. So we need to make sure that like the work that Jesse is doing, if he can bring the cost up to 100, then that's a different story. That is a completely different conversation, right? And so now you are really talking about like mass adoption. And so that would move kind of regulators for sure.
Thanks, Pia. That's again a very good segue into maybe our third topic, which we're going to do a little bit of futurology here. It's a very hard time to guess what's going to happen in the future. But zooming out a little bit and thinking about the next 5 years or the next few years, I would like to do a quick round with each of you, in which I would like to get your take on 3 things for each of you. Maybe we can start with Jesse. The first question would be, what trends are going to grow in the longevity space over the next few years? The second is what will feel outdated, and the third is realistically, what role does AI end up playing sort of 5 years from now?
Yeah, I think that the most powerful longevity treatments that we know of are lifestyle, and I think that I hope and believe that as that will become more widely recognized by I think it's a great point. Like most people who, when they think of longevity, they think of these people who are taking like a ton of supplements and eating some crazy diet and doing they have an inaccessible lifestyle. But I think there are practical things that everybody can do. This guy Zeke Emanuel, he's a professor at Penn, and he's a doctor, just came out with his book, Eat Your Ice Cream. It was very practical. And the things that he talked about were mostly lifestyle and mostly things that we were doing in our practice. And so I think that sort of recognition is going to be really valuable. And AI, I think, is what enables you to find a lifestyle that works for you. Because when the examples of lifestyle are so extreme, that becomes a turnoff. But when you have a tool that can help you figure out the exact lifestyle that's going to work for you, I think that's really powerful. And I do believe that the regulatory is going to change. I think there's a role for advocacy, but the cost driver is what's going to drive the regulatory change, not the advocacy, in my view, because we have in the US and many places around the world an unsustainable model in healthcare that's getting more and more expensive and will bankrupt us. And we have a tool that can drive down the cost 10x. And so that's going to force it. And we do see there's a trial right now in Utah where the state of Utah has allowed an AI agent to do refills on prescriptions. And that's, it's a limited set, of things with low risk, but there's no human in the loop, and it opens the regulatory window ever so slightly. I think it's going to happen. And I think over the next 5 years, we'll see more. It's going to be incremental. We'll see more and more changes. And eventually there will be more massive changes, and it's going to be driven by cost.
I think that even to support like what Jesse's saying, like even now, I think the FDA approved diagnosis done with AI for conjunctivitis, right? I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but like for pink eye, yeah. And so that is huge, and of course, I think that a lot of the diagnosis on imaging is gonna get kind of more quickly approved, and that's great. And once that door is open, like we can start growing that space.
Yeah, things have a way of happening, or like they trickle in and they happen slowly, and then suddenly they happen all at once. So it's interesting times for sure. Maybe Pia, I'd love to sort of ask you for the same as I asked Jesse. What becomes the norm in longevity over the next few years? What slows down or disappears, and what role does AI end up playing?
I think AI, kind of using AI to manage your health journey will become more and more the norm increasingly. And I think that, so I see that kind of happening, and we already know the numbers of, I don't know how many billion people are asking ChatGPT questions about their health and Gemini and such. So I think that trend is only going to grow. And I think it makes sense that it does. What I would like to see, and maybe this is the hopefully me, but I also think it's going to start happening, is like, so right now you have your digital layer, and you have kind of the interactions with the AI, like user AI, and then, but what I see, we're going to start seeing, I think, in the next kind of couple of years or less, is like the connection between the AI and providers, right? So for example, right now in Give Zero, the way it works is like we detect a pattern, and so we tell you, like, look, your hormone, this hormone is high, so you might consider doing a bone density test, because like even though you're like super young and you're not in, which again comes to how you're not the standard for age for getting a bone density test, you should get one. Maybe it's a good thing. So right now I get that from AI, and I'm like, okay, I need to go convince my doctor to get me like an order. I have to I have to advocate for myself and say, like, look, this hormone is high, and my mom had her menopause at 45, so I know I'm 43, but like maybe I should be doing a bone density test and not wait until I'm 50, because like am I wasting 7 years of my life that I could be doing something for my health? And so that's what happens now. But what I see happening in the future is like, okay, you get that information, you click here, you talk to an AI, you get the order, you go do the test, and then you go talk to a doctor with the order, with the test done, with all the information. So I think that link is going to happen a lot more. There are going to be a lot more companies and projects and that interface between like the AI and the medical provider on behalf of the user. And I can't wait to see that happen, because it makes the whole process so much more efficient.
Definitely, that'll be a game changer. I want to ask the same question to Carolina, and I'm particularly excited because you actually are speaking to the early stage companies that are starting today, and you can see actually from a bird's eye view what all these companies will be doing in a few years once their like vision actually comes to life. So same question, what changes in the next 5 years?
Well, first of all, I want to say that I can be, many times I'm very optimistic and hope for a world like Pia is talking about, where we don't have to struggle with doctors who have different views about menopause or autoimmune diseases or something like it's not so common for them, and that we will have other layers and be more, like, have more information and be more like owners of our own health. But I can also see that, for example, in the space of the startups, all the founders are many of them are experiences like, I don't know how you say, brain, like sumenage, like they're really tired.
Burnout.
Yes, like the game that VCs are asking for startups, it's a game where they have to go so quick. They have to grow so much. They have to work so much that I can see all of them with burnout. I see children, very, very young children using their cellulars for many hours everywhere in the world. I see we are all more anxious. So sometimes I'm very pessimistic about, even though AI gets forward, and in the last 2 months, what happened with Anthropic was like something that would happen in 5 years, and it happens in the last 2 months, and everything changes so quickly. And so I believe that governments and all the plans will change about what Jesse and Pia are saying. I'm also worried about how we are living our lives, because all this, what's happening, I'm talking about children, about people in general, and about what I see in founders, is something that it doesn't matter what happens with AI or with other founders. If we do not get like really aware of this, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whatever you do. So that's something I'm aware about, for example, founders, and that's something when we invest, we speak to them. I see all the time that they are facing burnout, and that's something that will not let them get to round A or to success. It's not with burnout that you get there. You have to manage it. We're planning to launch a program to manage burnout for startups, for example, and that's something I want to add.
I think probably
Very
all
refreshing take, investor. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead, Jesse. Cool. So yeah, that's it for sort of the structure section of the conversation. But we have a few questions that the folks in the audience have sent over. So I'll read a few of those. And please, I'll read off a question, and whoever feels like they have something to say, feel free to just jump in. So I'll read the first one. Autumn asks, how do we show compassion while still maintaining clarity to the patient that this is not a human that they're interacting with?
I think it's critical that, we don't say an AI agent is a human. I think people will become more comfortable with it over time. That it's just going to take time. And, the way we manage it right now is we have a human in the loop for all of our AI products. So there's a doctor in the loop that's reviewing everything. But I will say that the more people use our AI product, the more comfortable they are with it. And in many ways, it often has a better bedside manner than your average doctor. And I have seen, the logs of the chats people have, and they say things to the AI agent that we have not seen them open up and talk to their doctor in the same way. So in our practice, you have a view into what people say to their doctor and what they say to the AI. And it's not everybody. You have to be comfortable. Obviously, we have a biased population. But,
Yes,
I think.
Sorry.
I was just going to say the humanity of the bots is improving. And I think we're going to see that over time.
Yes, and I believe that younger generations feel much more comfortable speaking with AI than speaking with people, and they can say things they do not dare to tell to their doctors because they don't want to be judged, that they don't feel this way with AI. So it also has its positive side.
When we were starting Give Zero, we had this conversation about like what would our AI, how it would be embodied, right? And so there's a lot of AIs that have like people that talk to you, and we made kind of the call to stay away from that, because I think that for that exactly the other part of the question, right? How Nova is like a like a constellation. It's a non-form kind of entity, and we did that on purpose because we don't want Nova to be a human. We want to be very clear that we're not, and so that for us was a decision that we took early on. I think that showing compassion is very, very, very important, and again, getting the tone right is very difficult, and so I think that is kind of important to work on. Sorry, people are coming in and out of here.
Thanks, guys. Moving on to another question. This one was submitted to our forum before the call. The question is, how is AI being applied to doctors' needs as opposed to what we've mostly talked about, which is patients' needs? And he gives as an example longevity protocols, prescribing, and so on.
Actually, there's a lot more AI being built, improving the efficiency of our healthcare system. And so, reducing charting time, scribes for doctors, improving billing codes, reimbursement rates. My fear actually is that that's where most of the funding in healthcare is going right now, and that is not going to improve our healthcare system. In some ways, it's making it more expensive because it's improving the efficiency of reimbursing, from, you got AIs like competing on both sides from the payers and the providers, like to see who can, make more money off of this. And that's why we took a different approach. I have not seen there are very few AIs that have been built specifically working with patients in a medical setting. Most of them are like AI coaches. So, if you have an Oura Ring or a Whoop, or you get Function Health, a blood test or whatever, there's an AI tool you can use, but it's basically just a wrapper on, ChatGPT or Claude or whatever. But in order to transform our healthcare system, I believe we need AI practicing medicine in the foreground, and we haven't seen as much of that. It's harder because of the regulatory and because people are not fully ready to do it yet. But I think we're going to get there.
I think something that we need to kind of discuss if we're going to go there, Jesse, and I hope we do, is like we still don't have like a societal agreement of who holds the responsibility, right? Ultimately. So when you have like a doctor and they tell you something that it's not correct, like there is like legal procedures, like there is a path for, for challenging that and for getting, I don't know, like whatever it is, like, compensated or, yeah, exactly. So we still, and it's not just in medicine, right? This is like across the board with AI, like we don't know who's responsible, right? And so we need to like grow up as a society and have a conversation about like who's responsible. Is it the code? Is it is it the owner of the company that built it? Is it the person who implements it? Is it the user? Because like user beware, like all things are agents, like legal entities in and of themselves. And then if they are legal entities, like what is like the judiciary and legal procedure that we have for interacting with them? Like, I think this piece of the puzzle is not part of the conversation in general. And it's crucial if we're going to move to something like that. Because right now, like having like no responsibilities are really, really, really horrible kind of outcome for many people, right? So we need to agree where does the buck stop, and it's a hard conversation that we need to have, and that is government, is politics, is regulators, is like companies, is societies, advocacy, but we can't escape that one.
That's already happening in the mental health space, where there are suicides because of people who are speaking with AI and afterwards they get suicide. So I think that's very important, and we're already seeing it with some cases. So it will happen also in other spaces like the medical space, because the AI told me not to do anything and afterward I developed some bad disease or the other way. But the truth is that medicine isn't also like 1 + 1 is 2. So I think it's a very tough space to have a solution, but we should give that conversation for sure.
Definitely, and in saying that we're right on time, so I want to make sure to respect everybody's schedule here. This has been great. I want to thank you guys, the speakers first, for joining us. This has been super interesting to hear all of your perspectives. Also, thanks to all the people watching for joining us and engaging. Your questions were great. We actually have a few more questions that we're going to get the speakers to answer and send them over as an email afterwards for everybody that attended. So all the questions will be answered. And we'll also be sending a short feedback form after the webinar. Would really appreciate it if you guys could fill it out. It generally helps for us to make these sort of webinars better as we do more of them. Awesome. So thanks again, everyone.
Everybody.
Please do connect with us on LinkedIn. Again, thanks everyone. Have a great rest of your day.